everybody, it's Sarah, and today I want to share with you my September TBR, which for some reason has turned out massive. I don't know why I kept adding books to my TBR under the impression that I don't have that many on there yet, but it somehow happened, and now I have 10 books right here in physical form. I have 4 books that are released in September that I want to get to ASAP. And then I also have the 2 books that I'm pulling from my TBR jars. So September is going to be interesting, to say the least. Also because on the 31st of September I have the deadline for my bachelor paper. So that's gonna be fun. Anyway, let's start with the book that it's least urgent for me to get to, or that I feel that I need to get to the least urgently, and that is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This would be a reread for me. I started my reread of the Stormlight Archive series in July, and I had thought I would move right on to Oathbringer after reading the first 2 books in August, but I actually only started with the first 50 pages and then set it down and didn't continue. But yeah, since Book 4 is only coming out in November, I still have time to reread this, so it's kind of like low-key. It's on my TBR, but I don't need to get to it. You understand what I mean? Next is kind of a last chance book, and that is Everfair by Nisi Shawl. This is an alternate history steampunk fantasy, and it asks the question, what would have happened if the people of the Congo under the reign of Leopold II had advanced technology? Would all the atrocities during the colonial reign still have happened if they had the ability to fight back? And I have to say, I absolutely love the concept and the idea of this book, but I'm now about a third of the way into it. It has taken me since the beginning of July to get this far, and my main problem is, for some reason, I just cannot connect to the story at all. I think my main problem is that there is a huge amount of POV characters, and the chapters are only like 5 to 10 pages long, so very short, so you don't really get into the mind of the characters, and at least I don't really start caring about them. And yeah, so I decided to give it until the end of September, and if I have not finished this book by then, which I hope I will have, I will DNF it. But yeah, I still hope that maybe it starts picking up and that maybe I'll start getting into it a bit more. Let's continue on with the releases next, otherwise I'm sure I'll forget about them. First I have Orphea by Joanne M. Harris, who of course is the author of one of my favorite books of all time, The Gospel of Loki, which by the way I reread in August, but more about that in my August wrap-up. And this is her newest release. I think it comes out on September the 3rd. I'm not sure. I didn't look at the dates when they're going to be released, the books. But this is a retelling of the Orpheus myth, as far as I get. However, we're following a mother, I think on the search for her child or something, or fighting for her child, and like, it brings together 2 of my favorite things. Mothers in fiction as well as retellings, and I'm sure this book is going to be amazing. Also, it is illustrated and just it looks gorgeous. Look at this cover. Then the second release I'm looking forward to and I hope to pick up in September is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is an Own Voices YA urban fantasy. I think it's set in New Orleans, and we're following a Mexican trans boy as he summons a ghost to prove to his family that he is in fact a boy, because they do not want to accept who he is. I think that's what the plot was about. I have to say I have not looked into the plot since the beginning of the year, since I put it on my most anticipated releases list, and I'm really excited to get to it either way. Another one of my most anticipated releases of the year is Nightshine by Tessa Gretton. Some of you might know that I really enjoyed Tessa Gretton's adult novels, Queens of Inishlia as well as Lady Hotspur. However, this one is YA, so it will be the first time I read one of Tessa Gretton's YA novels, and I really hope I will enjoy it, because if I do, then she might turn out to be a new favorite author for me. But I feel like I cannot say that having only read her adult works. I also cannot say much about the plot of this book because I basically put it on my have to read list when I heard her describe it as queer house moving castle, and that's all I needed to know. I don't need to know the plot. House Moving Castle is my favorite movie of all time. I do not like the book that much, but I love the movie, and like the only thing that was missing in that movie was queerness, so I cannot imagine the book not being good. And then the last release that I'm excited for in September is The Silvered Serpents by Roshani Chokshi, which is book 2 in the Gilded Wolves series. And The Gilded Wolves is kind of an ensemble heist story set at the end of the 19th century in Paris. We have a huge and diverse cast of characters, and I really enjoyed the first book when I read it in 2019. I might have to reread it before I read The Silvered Serpents, because I read this in February of 2019, so like over 1.5 years ago. However, I do not know when I'm supposed to fit this in, so yeah, we'll see about that. Next, I have a classic that I want to read in September, and that is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Some of you might remember that I buddy read 2 books with my mom in July. And we decided, or better said, I decided that we're going to read Virginia Woolf next, because, like, from everything I've heard about her novels and her works, it's exactly the type of story that we would read and then love to discuss. So we're going to start with Mrs. Dalloway, because a lot of people said that this is a good place to start with Virginia Woolf, and then maybe also in September go on to A Room of One's Own, which of course is an essay or a collection of essays. I'm not sure right now. Then next I have some high fantasy series that I want to continue on with. Of course, book 8 in the Wheel of Time series, The Path of Daggers, which is the next book that I want to pick up. I think I already said it in my mid-month wrap-up, but I decided to like scrap the goal of trying to finish the Wheel of Time by the end of the year, because it stresses me out too much and I just don't have fun reading the books anymore. So I'm just going to continue on with the usual 1 book per month, and for September that would be The Path of Daggers. Another series I'm going to continue is the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. I am now at book 3 or book 5, depending on whether or not you count the short story collections of the Witcher series, and that book is Baptism of Fire. And I think I will actually finish this series before the end of the year, because I can read like 1 book a month in this series as well, and then I'm done by the end of the year. Anyway, this series follows Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher. That means that he has been magically, alchemically mutated to be better suited to hunt and kill monsters. Now, his destiny is entwined with the destiny of a young girl named Ciri, and her fate might just have something to do with the fate of the world. At least that's what I gathered so far. Because to be honest, I still don't 100% know what this series is about. But anyway, it's written in a really interesting and atypical way for fantasy, and so far I'm enjoying myself well enough to continue on and to want to finish the series. Then from September until December, Ashley from Frolic Through Fiction is hosting the Tolkien Along, in which they're going to read The Hobbit and then 1 book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy each month from September until December. Now, I have 1 book left in the Lord of the Rings trilogy to read. That is The Return of the King. However, I have decided that because I spend a lot of time between books, always, sometimes like in the middle of books, sometimes I haven't continued on with the book for like 3 years after reading the first half and then continued on with the second half of the book. And so I decided I want to finish The Return of the King and then read the entire trilogy like back to back to get like a better feel for the story and for the writing and everything. And so I decided, since I don't want to reread The Hobbit anyway, because I really didn't like The Hobbit, I am going to read The Return of the King in September, and then October, November and December join the Readalong. And so yeah, I'm going to finally read this book. I'm going to finally finish The Lord of the Rings. So this month really is a month for like reading massive and well-known fantasy series. So now I have 3 buddy reads left before we can get into my TBR jars. The first buddy read is The Wolf of Oranjaro by K.S. Veloso. I also don't know exactly what this story is about. I think it's about a queen who has to take back her kingdom, but also the entire series is called The Chronicles of the Bitch Queen, which I don't need more to want to read this series. Also, this was another one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I haven't had time to pick it up since February, which I think was when this came out. And book 2 is going to come out at the end of September, so maybe I'll pick it up right away. We'll see. Then I'm also buddy reading The Shadowed Sun. I'm buddy reading this with Kira from Book Bella, and I will leave her channel linked down below. This is book 2 in the Dreamblood duology by N.K. Jemisin, the first book I read in August. And this is set in a kind of ancient Egypt-inspired world where there's people who can kill you through dreams. And it follows one of these dudes who goes around and kills through dreams, and he kind of comes behind some corruption in his government, and there's like a whole deal around that. And I really enjoyed book 1. This was a horrible description, by the way, but it's really hard to describe this book. But anyway, I really enjoyed book 1, and I hope I'll enjoy book 2 just as much. But book 1 was a really fast read, so I think I won't worry as much to like having to finish this book in September. I hope it's going to be a fast read as well. And then the last book I have before we get to my TBR jars is the first book that was chosen as a buddy read for my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. In that book club we concentrate, and it's all about reading adult high fantasy written by women. Although the high part of the high fantasy is kind of like questionable sometimes, it's fantasy written by women, adult fantasy. And the first book we chose was Gods of Shade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a Mayan mythology inspired story following Cassiopeia, who lives in Mexico in the 20s of the last century. And one day she accidentally frees a Mayan god of death, and she makes a deal with him. So I'll see what this book is about. I'm really excited already, and I've heard a lot of good things actually, but also some like not so good. But the things that I've heard that were not so good are things that I usually enjoy in books, so I'm not worried too much about it, to be honest. And we'll see how much I love it. So now, onto my TBR jars. I actually exchanged like the little thingies that are in there. I kind of took out the books that I had already read and so on. So the first book I pulled from my TBR jar is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Then, and as always, I'll pull 3 books out of here, and then I'll decide which one I want to read most. Next is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, and I don't think I'll get to this month. It's like way too chunky for my already huge TBR. And then lastly, so the last book I pulled from my TBR is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. And now we just gotta see which series I'm going to continue on with this month. Of course, just love this. The Draconis Memoriam series by Anthony Ryan, which are some chunkers. Yeah. The Bowl of Doom has spoken, so I guess that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna have another chunky book on my TBR. Why exactly does this feel like I hate myself? That's way too many books. But anyway, before this all falls down, this was it for my September TBR. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribe. Also, just maybe give me a thumbs up and subscribe out of pity for all the books I have to read in September. I don't have to read them, but I want to read in September. But anyway, all the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club are also in the description box down below, so go and check those out as well. I would love it if some more of you would join in the buddy read. There might be, actually I didn't mention that yet, there might be a live show at the beginning of October for that book, so I don't know dates yet or like anything specific, but yeah, I'd love it if you joined anyway, whether or not we're going to have a live show. And with that said, I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!